Right now, if you wanted to, you could walk up to a horse, grab its mane, and swing yourself onto its back. People do it every day. It's so normal we barely think about it. And that's wild, because taming a 1,000-pound wild animal so it'll carry you around is one of the strangest bargains humans ever struck with nature. It's older than the wheel, older than most of the crops we eat. Humans figured out how to turn a terrified prey animal into a partner. So here's the question that should bother you more than it does. Zebras exist. They're basically horses in a Halloween costume. Same family, same size, same continent full of grass. So why, after thousands of years of trying, did nobody ever ride one into battle? Let's go back to the beginning. Around 3,500 BCE, on the steppes of Central Asia, humans made their first move on horses. Not zebras, regular wild horses, the ancestors of today's domestic breeds. Archaeologists studying the Botai culture, in what's now northern Kazakhstan, found something strange in old horse teeth: bit wear. Microscopic damage that only happens when a metal or rope bit rubs against enamel, over and over, for years. That's the fingerprint of riding. Not just herding, riding. Think about what that actually required. Someone had to get close enough to a wild horse to touch its face, then close enough to put something in its mouth, then close enough to sit on its back and not get killed. That's not one lucky moment. That's generations of trial, error, and probably a lot of very brave, very unlucky people. But it worked. And once it worked, everything changed. Trade routes got longer, armies got faster, empires got bigger. The horse didn't just help humans get around, it rewired human civilization. So naturally, when Europeans reached Africa centuries later and saw zebras standing around in herds, doing the exact same grass-eating, herd-forming things horses do, the assumption was obvious. This should work too. It didn't. Here's what makes this genuinely interesting. People didn't just assume zebras were untamable and give up. They actually tried, repeatedly, with real money and real effort behind it. The most famous case is Walter Rothschild, a wealthy British zoologist in the late 1800s who trained zebras to pull a carriage and then drove that carriage through the streets of London, right up to Buckingham Palace, just to prove it could be done. And it could. Sort of. A few individual zebras, handled carefully from birth, could be trained to pull a cart or wear a harness. But a few individuals can be coaxed into limited work is a completely different thing from domestication. Domestication isn't about one tame animal. It's about breeding a whole population that reliably tolerates humans, generation after generation, without needing to be individually broken by a fearless eccentric. That's the part that never happened with zebras. Not once, not anywhere, across the entire history of contact between humans and the species. Here's what makes this so important. This isn't really a story about one stubborn striped animal. It's a story about how rare domestication actually is. Of the roughly 148 large wild mammal species on Earth that scientists have identified as plausible candidates, only about 14 were ever successfully domesticated. Cows, pigs, sheep, goats, horses, a tiny, exclusive club. The biologist and author Jared Diamond, writing in the 1990s, laid out why so many obvious candidates fail. He called it the Anna Karenina principle, borrowing the opening line of Tolstoy's novel. Happy families are all alike, but every unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. Domesticable animals are all alike in the boxes they check. A candidate species only needs to fail one of those boxes to be permanently disqualified. Zebras fail more than one. First, temperament. Zebras panic faster and harder than horses do. Their stress response is more extreme, and it doesn't fade with exposure the way a horse's does. A horse raised around humans calms down over time. A zebra, even one raised from birth in captivity, tends to stay wired for flight. Second, and this one surprises people, zebras are vicious. Genuinely dangerous in a way horses generally aren't. Zoo records and animal handlers consistently rank zebra bites among the most severe injuries caused by hoofed animals in captivity. Unlike a horse, which tends to bite and release, a zebra bites and holds on, twisting and shaking. There are more documented serious maulings of zoo staff by zebras than by lions. Yeah, zebras have hurt more zookeepers than lions have. Let that sit for a second. Third, they're almost impossible to lasso. This one's mechanical, not psychological. Zebras have an unusually sharp sense of exactly where a rope is in space relative to their body, and they duck and twist to avoid it with a precision that horses just don't have. Ranchers and researchers who've tried to capture wild zebras with standard cattle roping techniques describe it as nearly futile. Fourth, their social structure resists herding the way horse society doesn't. Domestication depends partly on an animal accepting a human as something like a dominant herd member. Horses evolved in a way that made that substitution possible. Zebra herds are more fluid, more reactive, and less built around a following the leader instinct that a human can slot into. Stack all of that together. extreme stress response, dangerous defensive behavior, evasive reflexes, and a social structure that resists a human standing in for the herd leader, and you get an animal that fails the Anna Karenina test on nearly every axis at once. It's not that ancient Africans were less clever than ancient Central Asians. It's that they were handed a much harder animal. This pattern repeats everywhere. Moose look tameable, big, herbivorous, calm-seeming, but they're too unpredictable and too hard to contain. Gazelles are fast and skittish and simply run themselves to death under stress in captivity. African buffalo are strong enough to be useful like oxen, but they're aggressive enough that they're considered one of the most dangerous animals on the continent, tame-raised or not. Every one of these is a version of the same story. An animal that looks like it should work and doesn't, because of some specific trait humans can't breed or train around fast enough. So here's the full picture. Around 3,500 BCE, humans in Central Asia pulled off one of the great gambles in history and tamed the horse. Centuries later, explorers looked at zebras and assumed the same trick would work twice. Individual zebras got trained. Rothschild even drove one down the streets of London, but population-wide domestication never happened because zebras fail almost every test a species needs to pass. They panic instead of calm, they bite and don't let go, they dodge ropes with eerie precision, and their herds don't bend around a human leader the way horse herds do. And that brings us back to you, sitting on a couch, in a world shaped by which animals said yes 10,000 years ago and which ones said no. Every time you've seen a horse, a cow, a farm, you were looking at the tiny handful of species that happened to check every box. The zebra just never got the chance because it never checked a single one. Domestication wasn't really something humans did to animals. It was a negotiation, and most animals on Earth, it turns out, walked away from the table.